Karen, over to you.
Yes. Hello, everyone. Good evening, and welcome to the I and Not I session on imposter syndrome. It's really fantastic to have all of you here today, whether you're a seasoned member of our community or joining us for the first time. For those of you who may be experiencing imposter syndrome or are just curious to learn more about it, I think you're in the absolutely right place. Our goal this evening is to create a safe and supportive space where we can all explore identities, roles, behaviors, and hopefully gain a better understanding of ourselves in the process. And to that effect, now it's my pleasure to introduce to you our speaker for today, Anil Thomas. Anil is a globally recognized NLP master trainer and Gestalt practitioner, and his expertise is indebted to his teachings of his mentor, Dr. Richard McHugh. He has also honed his skills under the guidance of co-developers of NLP like Judith and Robert Dills. Anil conducts certification courses in various parts of the world, including Russia, China, Hong Kong, Australia, and several states in India. You can connect with him on social media platforms such as Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn. He's there as Anil K. Thomas. And Anil, we're extremely grateful to have you here this evening. And we look forward to the wisdom and expertise you'll be sharing with us. And to the rest of you, I encourage you to engage, ask questions, share your experience, whatever it is that you feel like throughout this discussion. So, without further ado, I would like to hand over the reins to our very own Shreya Krishnan. She's our managing director here at India. So, let's dive into today's session. Shreya?
Thank you so much, Karen, and thank you for the introduction to Anil. Let me quickly speak to those of you who are new to the Anita B world as to who we are and what we do. AnitaB.org is a global not-for-profit, and in India, we are a for-profit social enterprise that works deeply in this space of working with women and non-binary technologists, people who work in the space of technology, people who use technology, entrepreneurs. The idea is to create safe, equitable workplaces which are invested in diversity, equity, and inclusion to ensure that we sort of move towards a world that's more inclusive and that has the ability to bring in voices and people who are otherwise left behind. I think the imposter syndrome is a very important topic to address because we work with a lot of women and non-binary folks in leadership as well, especially when we're trying to, access avenues of information or knowledge or growth. There is research to show that women are crippled by something that the imposter syndrome does to them. There is research to show that for a job, if there is a 40% match on job description, men will apply for it, but women will apply for that job only if there are 100% aligned to the job description. So these are one of the many factors or statistical analysis and data which is showcased to us as we go and work with these communities. So instead of talking about imposter syndrome from an experience point of view, we thought it'd be amazing to bring in an expert who'll be able to give us a psychological view. And I can't think of anybody better than Anil Thomas to be doing this for us. He's a voice that is world renowned. And if you start following him, you will know why, as to being an authority on being able to translate what some of this means into simple language. And Anil does that so beautifully in all of his classes as well. So it's my pleasure and honor to invite him onto this platform. And you'll see him a lot more, even in GHC. He's going to be present doing things around mental health. So Anil does a lot of work in social impact as well. He's a huge champion. He runs Umang Foundation, his entire team, and they do some incredible work. So if you're interested in looking up Umang Foundation, please do so because they do a lot of free mental health support for people who don't have access to it. Without further ado, I'm going to stop talking and I'm going to hand the floor to Anil. Anil, it's over to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Shreya. Thank you, Karen. And thank you, everybody who joined in this good evening to talk, to discuss, and to share. I look forward to having conversations with you. There are some people I know, there's some people I'll get to know, and there are a lot of people with just names on the screen. I wonder what's that. It's important that we give face to the name, and then it's important to give motion to those names, and it's important to give voice to those names. The times when we feel we're not good enough, we are stepping into something called as self-doubt. We're stepping into something called as, am I good enough? We're stepping into something called as, am I worth it? I'm stepping into something called as, Can I contribute? Do I belong here? Is this safe? And all these questions are not about the field or the person I'm with. All these questions are about myself. Am I safe when someone chooses to be with me? Am I enough when someone chooses to be with me? Can somebody be enough? So there's a constant interpretation of what I think, what I project, and who am I, and what I seek, and what I feel. Well, imposter syndrome is a rather relevant term, and it's just a term which encompasses a lot of things that's more literal. I'd like to break this term imposter syndrome because it doesn't mean anything by such. Well, if you break this term, what you're left with is self-doubt. Now, is that simple? Yeah. So let's forget this coconut term. Let's forget these big jargon terms of him. And also, I think because it's modern, the DSM, the Diagnostic and the Statistical Manual, doesn't have a way to diagnose what is imposter syndrome. So you see, imposter syndrome is just a term we say that is that, and then we don't know really what's the verb form of it, or what is the thing that I'm doing because of that, and therefore I keep this term and I keep tagging these terms and I keep labeling these terms. What if we could bring it down to the lowest common denominator? What the hell is imposter syndrome? Well, it's a psychological trait. Forget the word psychological, it's a behavior. Is it implicit? Is it explicit? It's implicit. It's within. Is it outside? Can you see it? Not really. It's something that happens within me. These are voices that happens within me. They're self-talks that happens within me. Or these are talks that I carry through the journey of my life, what I've heard from my parents, from my teachers during my early days, that you're not good enough, or you have to work twice as hard, or you can't get it, or, some Rajesh will get it, or you won't even be worthy enough. You see all these voices where I'm not good enough. As we grow, we begin to keep these voices with us. And when we keep these voices with us, when life gives us success, we don't believe we deserve it. Why? Because my mother told me I'm not good enough. My teacher told me I'm not worthy enough. Or someone told me I'll never succeed. Someone even told me that to pass, okay, dikha, you pass and you show this grade and I will, probably resign. Something like that. So these voices stayed with me. So to be simply put, self-doubt emerges as an internal behavior, as a voice which I keep contemplating, and I keep contemplating that did I really deserve this? Am I the right person to do this? It's a voice, right? Now I'm going to stop this definition and I'm going to go to the next thing. When these voices go on without my ability to stop it, well, now it's clinical manifestation. Now we need a psychiatrist or a clinician to work with me. Okay. Now, are these voices continuously within me? Is it hallucinations? Is it schizophrenic? Well, now we need a clinician or psychiatrist to work with it. Well, with these voices constantly happening within me, I may get depression. I may be constantly anxious. Now, if these are clinical, then again I will need. So the manifestation of a constant self-doubt is clinical. The manifestation or the repercussion or the long-term effect of these voices can be clinically diagnosed. That can be on the DSM scale. That is tangible. But imposter syndrome can range from 0 to infinity, from having my volition to access it to no. Okay, that's my second part. My third part. Well, imagine a priest giving a marriage counseling. After every marriage counseling, he comes and feels, how can I give a marriage counseling, right? I'm not married, or I don't know anything about. So that can be an imposter syndrome. Or a guy doctor who's going to give a counseling session or a talk on pregnancy. Now, he can probably always have this fear. What if somebody asks me, like, how can you talk on pregnancy? So he's constantly living in this questionable arena. And that can be the onset of it. Okay. So we have, you're getting an example of that? Okay. So right now I'm sitting in front of you with all those cameras not on. I'm thinking, are they judging me? Are they evaluating me? Are they mocking me? You see, these voices are a part of life. We can't do away with it. It's going to be there with it. But at some point in time, we can step in and say, it's okay. Or we can step in and use our coping mechanisms to deal with it. At every stage in life, we are representing ourselves. You see, we are a classic representation of self. So I'll come and tell you, hey, you know what? This is my Instagram handle. But that's not who I am. I'm representing that profile. So I'm a representation of that ID in that domain. When I leave Instagram, I come to LinkedIn. I'm now a different representation altogether. We all know how different our representations are between Instagram and LinkedIn. And as I keep changing these representations, I realize that I have different capabilities and different abilities everywhere. Maybe, just maybe, on Instagram, you may pose with a swimwear. But before you put that on LinkedIn, you will say, can I put it here? Should I put it here? Will I be judged if I put it here? Do you get that? Is classic doubt. And that's worthy, because what you're saying is, I'm going to do something which is inappropriate to the context. Should I? Can I? Must I? You see, and that's how it begins. Well, so self-doubt is good, and we need that self-doubt. When you want to move from level A to level B, you're not already there at level B, but you are going to move from level A to level B. Say I'm a manager, assistant manager, and Shreya promotes me to be senior manager. On day one, I am going to have this so-called imposter syndrome. I am going to have the self-doubt at all times with me because I'm not there yet. When I begin the journey, self-doubt is a neurological response to know that I am in a whole new place. But will that stay with me for even after 1 year? Then what that means is, A, I don't have a clearer understanding of something called as self-worth, concept of self, and self-esteem, or I don't have the will to learn the skills to move from assistant manager to senior manager. Most of the times when we present things on the resume, we will fluff it up and we'll present it. So we'll say, yeah, I can, of course, yes, yes. But on the first day of the job, you're beginning to feel that. And that's fair enough. But now, are you going to learn on the job? You can change those voices. Do you get what I'm saying here? So this self-doubt comes from the aspect of, I'll fake it till I make it. It's a learning curve also. To begin with, I don't have it. And I know that. But do I not have it even after 6 months? Then I'm a fraud. Imposter syndrome is a sense of, I don't deserve the success. But at that point in time, the feeling is that I'm a fraud. But am I a fraud? That's the question. That am I doing it purposely to bully someone, to cheat someone? So we are coming across these two definitions of the representation that I'm representing. There is an I who is representing this representation. What am I representing? And how close do I feel I'm connected to this representation? So let's say my Instagram speaks of love is this true bird. My second post talks of this beautiful moonwalk and this and that. So my representation is good. It's about poetry. It's about love. It's long walks. It's moonlight. It's grape juice. It's, oh my God, it's poetry. But when you meet me, I'm a fucking loner. Sorry. When you meet me, I'm like a, I'm sad. I'm lonely, and I'm no one to love, and I'm sulking. So that means there is a gap. There is a disparity between the who I show I am, my mask, and the who I am within myself. That brings the I and the not I. So I'm representing who I'm not to you, because I begin to believe I'm not that, and I long that, and I wish I had that. But that's never going to be mine, I think, I believe. So I begin to put up a mask of who I'm not. The guy who goes to Ladakh every year may not post so much of Ladakh. But the guy who goes for the very first time, his Instagram feed will be filled with Ladakh. So when we show what we rarely have, or we miss, or we long for, that is the representation. But what you already have, if you already live in a garden house with this great greens, you're not going to show this. But from Bombay, if I go to Bangalore, I'm going to click photos of every green tree because there's so much of green. Then I go to Delhi, I see more green. I go to the redwood forest in the States, I'm going to click, oh my God, plants, can they really exist? So many, I've only seen them in Discovery Channel. So that begins to be my doubt. That's the not I. And the moment I begin to feel I'm not, I cannot, I don't belong, I'm not enough, there is no safety here, I can't contribute, nobody will participate with me, I'm not able to relate, nobody will relate to me, I create this representation. I create the two me's, the one which I am, which I will never show anyone. Because the moment I show this to someone, I'm going to be abused or bullied or abandoned. So the fear of getting abused again, bullied again, or abandoned again will help me never show this real, trying, vulnerable self. So what are we showing? We're going to show the strong personality. We're going to show that's okay. If she had to walk off from my life, it's okay. It's good that she walked off. But deep inside, I'm crying. It's like saying that it's okay. What happened, happened. But what's happening inside? It's not the mask. It's not the persona. It's not the representation, but what's happening within. Clear? The second last point. When did we learn to put this persona? How did we learn that this is a coping strategy? This didn't start today. This started when the first time we were abused, yelled at, abandoned, bullied, the very first time. And we learned to survive either by pleasing them or by just showing them that we are competent enough or by showing them that we are strong enough. So we can showcase them this. And then we decided never to show the weak self, never to cry in public, never to tell them that we are affected. So that day, at the point of impact, we created the two selves. And we decided we'll never show our real self out. Because that time we were abused and bullied. We were tormented and abandoned. So we began to form this belief that I'm not enough or something is wrong with me. Not that anything is wrong with you. But the belief that something is wrong with me creates the mask. And therefore, we want to put these helmets, we need to put these safety gears extra to show you that, hey, you know what, I'm Anil Thomas. So what is Anil Thomas? I'll have this blue tick. If not, I'll pay and buy and get this blue tick for you because that's how you will know who I am. You know, very few people now there's no distinction between both. I'll show you that, you know what, my posts will have the 700 likes because if it's not, then I'm nobody. You know, I need to have this 1 lakh followers, 4.3 million followers, because then I am who I am. So because of the impact, because of the event of abuse, hurt, hate, torment, etc., I've learned to show my shell of the lobster. But inside the shell is the lobster. The shell is not the lobster. I need to see the lobster, and to find the lobster, you got to go inside the shell. The shell has no life. It's dead. In fact, there is no life to it. It's just a calcinated surface. It's hard and it doesn't grow. And that's why the lobster has to change the shell regularly because the old shell outfits it. So it has to form the new shell. If it doesn't come out of the old shell and doesn't wait for the new shell to appear, it is going to choke and die inside its own created first shell. That's the mask. And that's the separation. So where do you see this outside? Well, this is happening inside, implicit. But where do you see it outside? On the outside, you see it on behaviors. You see it on representations on the body. You see it in these two places. What do people want to show you more of themselves? Is it the car? Is it the bike? What do they identify with most other than themselves, their emotions, or their existence? All of that becomes their representation. What if I always tell you, you know, I have this 8-bedroom hall kitchen. And in every conversation, I bring this up. You know, this I'm beginning to identify with my representation. These representations could start from my tattoos, it can go to my possessions, it can be my ambitions, it can be my accumulations, it can be my assets, it can be my certifications, they can be anything. It can be my love partners, it can be the amount of scotch I consume or my sexual relations. It can be anything. What do I want to showcase more? And what am I showing the world that I identify with becomes my mask, becomes my persona. So it's seen in the noun, it's seen in the adjective, it's seen in the verb, it's seen in the behavior. It's seen outside. But we can't judge that. And the reason why we can't judge it is because these are voices inside. So the question is, how do we deal with it? That's the last aspect. How do we deal with it? Well, it's very simple. First of all, you gather some courage to face those hurts again. You become brave again to look in the eye of the demon that you still keep alive. You are not affected by the event that happened. You are affected by the memory of the event which you relive every day. So we got to be brave enough to look at that memory and say, one, it wasn't my responsibility what happened to me. It wasn't my fault that happened to me. But to heal from that is my responsibility. What happened to me was not my problem, was not my fault, was not my responsibility. What happened to me did not happen to me because I was not enough. I was enough. What happened to me was not my problem. But to heal from it is my responsibility. And as long as I do not heal from it, I will never be able to step into something called as forgiveness. Forgiving without self-healing is an attempt to forget. And it is pointless because you'll remember again. And when you remember again, it will trigger you again. Forgiveness is forgetting, and when you remember, it doesn't affect you. That's forgiveness. The difference between forgiveness, when you add forgiveness with self-healing, you're able to forget it, and when it shows up, it doesn't bother you. It doesn't freeze you. It doesn't fight you. Yeah, and that helps you bring something called as compassion. The entire Buddhist psychology is built around this word compassion. So what is compassion? Compassion is to understand that what happened to me was because of somebody else's traumatic response, was because of somebody else's coping mechanism, and it's not my fault. It was not my fault. I need not hide myself in those shells. It wasn't my fault what happened. But they needed help, and I was the victim there. It was still not my fault. When the wave rose, when it was tsunami, I was there on the shore. It's not my fault. It was seasonal change. It was the location and the position of something more catastrophic, but it was not my fault. It's not my fault. So constantly blaming and punishing is not going to find the solution. So the way out is to recognize that it wasn't my fault, but to heal from it is my responsibility. And if I don't heal, I can't forgive. If I can't forgive, I can't participate in something called as compassion. And if I don't, then I play the same loop all over again. So that's about it. I hope you get a fair idea of the self-doubt, how it originates, the representations that you carry, the masks that you wear. How do you defend that? How do you confine that? How do you define that? And then to understand where was that originated, and then how do you deal with it should you choose to deal with it. They're all behavioral traits on the outside, but on the inside, they can be demonic, catastrophic, and only you know that. Yeah. Thank you, Anita B, for this opportunity. Thank you, Shreya, dear friend, and Karen.
Anil, it's time to switch gears to that part of the event that you're always like, what are you going to ask me? But I'm going to ask you a whole bunch of questions around dealing with this, right? I know you say that there's this line that you said that really hit me once. You said that when you take on the voice of the abuser, you've become your own abuser.
Yeah.
And that line stays with me, and I say it so often because, when that voice is in your head, you think you don't have a choice. But when you suddenly realize it's you replaying that voice over and over again, you realize you are doing this to yourself. So I want you to speak a little bit to that, because that seems like a nice, interesting juncture to discuss because of what you spoke about the imposter syndrome and how it cripples us. Now, the crippling is coming from the outside. So how do you then pause for a moment and then, recognize it?
Yeah.
A little bit.
I have read this once. I think it was something from Batman, or I don't know, maybe it's an Instagram meme that I read, which says, if you kill a killer, the world still has the same number of killers. So, if you become strong in order to fight the abuser, you become greater than your abuser, but now the world has one more abuser. So the way to it is through it. You got to go through it. And that going through it is the metaphor of knowing that how do I choose to look in the eye of that and not fight it because that's not the demon, but to know that I'm enough or I need help. Well, they need help, but I need help here too. And my judgment of me, my point of views of me, my beliefs about me is not going to be about this day or this event. I read this morning on one of my colleagues, Svetlana's, on her notice board, on a dashboard over there, I read, she said, it's just a bad day, not a bad life. So to be able to distinguish between this event and the rest of life, not to have a generalization of self from the window of that event. And we must definitely, all of us, have had, say, 10 such horrible event. So the proclivity is to be pulled towards those because they're sad and sulking and sympathetic and all of that. But what about those 4,000 good events? How did we forget that? Sure. So also, healing from that is my responsibility. And because it's my responsibility to heal from it, it doesn't mean I should do it alone. I can reach out to communities like these. I can reach out to people. I can reach out. Because it's my responsibility to heal from it, it does not mean I do it alone. Yeah. So this transference keeps happening, We begin to feel, was it me? Was it because of me? Was it because I came here? No. Don't give yourself so much importance.
I mean, this reminds me of the me, and me is talking to the me through me, Nityananda. I mean, I wanted to do it with the voice, but I do know I have a lot of questions, but I know we have an extremely invested audience. I know some of the folks in here who are probably waiting to ask questions. So let me not take up too much time. We'll open for questions and then I'll come back again. You can share questions. Please put on your videos because we'd love to see you. Or you can also pop them in the chat and one of us can read them out. But you know what? It's an imposter syndrome session. Why don't you just turn on your video and ask the question?
One of the ways you deal with imposter syndrome could be to ask people, how do you know? Like, this, I have the self-doubt. The question is, how do you know? When you keep up to this question, how do you know? You'll realize that what they hold on is not going to be true. I don't think I'm good enough. How do you know? Because I've never been good enough. How do you know? See, these are all vague terms which doesn't have concrete outcome. Because the last time when I did something, it didn't give me good results. Great. So you have a proof. How did you learn something about it? Most of the times, imposter syndrome comes from the tangible definition of not having a definitive skill output assessment. So, well, I tried to do Excel and it didn't give me, and my boss yelled at me, or my colleague yelled at me, or my upline yelled at me. Great. So you have a reference point. Did you learn that after that? No, I don't think I can learn because, at this age, I can't learn. They'll again go in a loop. The moment you get them to one point of why they feel they're not good enough, it's a skill issue. The moment you bring that out, they will go into another loop. So sometimes it's counseling, sometimes it's conversation, sometimes it's skills, So it depends what are they dealing with and to be able to pose those questions. And we all have doubts, and doubts are proof that we're doing things outside our comfort zone. Doubts are proof that we're doing. The very first time I remember, it was 2007 or something, I was giving a talk at the SNDT college. And an ex-student of mine, Manju, she told me, come and give a talk. And I'm like, what? To a all-girls college? So, I was nervous as hell. We all will have that. It's just proof that we're going to do things which is outside our domain. It's just a neurological proof. Think about those times that you feel that your success doesn't belong to you because you didn't work hard. Think about the time when you feel, one common dialogue which we use, I think most of us would have used it or at least heard this, is, I don't know how did I get so lucky. I have you in my life. And have you felt like this at least once for someone? that you are having something more than what you deserve? Yeah, I'm not saying telling that, but I'm telling you feeling that. To have that experience at a feeling level where you feel you're not good enough. And that feeling is, I don't think I have something to contribute to your life. I think I'm here to take from you because you are so good for me. I don't think I can contribute anything to you because I don't have anything to contribute to you. And that is not true. Yeah. So the next time when you look at your partner, I mean, it's good to say that. It's good unconditional support, but make sure it's not engraved at a deep feeling level. You get what I'm saying? Yeah. I'm open for questions if you have anything.
Folks, if you don't ask questions, I can hijack this entire conversation, but I see a hand. Yashaswini, yes. Go
Yes.
ahead.
Please tell me.
Hi, it
Hey.
was a very wonderful session. This is my first time here. I expected a lot of technical stuff like AI and other things, and it is very nice that you spoke about this. And the line that I liked the most was I'll read it for you. When you think of your abuser, you are your abuser. So I really like that line a lot. And the question I have is everybody has some painful memories. Everybody in this world, nobody is devoid of it.
That's what makes us human, sister.
Yes. How do we forget these painful memories and turn into a beautiful flower or a butterfly?
Boy, that's like a hell of a transformation. Okay. Well, I would say, why forget it? My question is, why forget it? That's what made me who I am. My personal history is mine. For what, for what reason would I want to forget my personal history? My hurts and my pains is my breakups and my abuses have made me who I am today. So when I look at my past events, however catastrophic, I got to understand that my events have information and emotions. When I look at my past events, I'm not looking at the information, I'm getting sucked into the emotions. Maturity or self-work is the ability to distinguish between emotions and informations, to deactivate the emotions. So every time I look at it, I have information. When you watch a movie of some kind of an abuse, are you going to cry? Well, then what you're saying is, if yes, there are movies where you've cried, what you're saying is that information elicits emotions. Well, and bad emotions are because something in that screen connects you with them. One of your hologram, which is not worked with, connected with the abuse or the abuser or the context. Well, these are representations that self-work needs to be done. And doing self-work doesn't make you superhero. Self-work is a progressive journey. And when you start doing the work like brushing your teeth, after 24 hours, you got to brush your teeth again. And maybe some days you got to brush it in 6 hours interval. And maybe when you're on a camp, you don't brush it for 2 days also. So there are frequencies, and that's what life is. Self-work is not a one-time event. It's a continuous, ongoing, progressive journey. How much time do we use in navigating through the self-hurt? Well, as much as I say grief and pain and loss, grief and pain and loss may have its life. And if you don't work, it will fade off, but it may take 12 years. Like if you look at the first breakup that you had, you must have thought, my God, how will I overcome this? But today, after maybe 10 years, that X is your password, but you could reach that stage, but it took you 10 years. What I'm saying is, can you have achieved this in 6 months, 8 months? The answer is yes. The question is how. Yeah. Well, one of my teachers, Bandler, somebody said, time heals everything. He says, that's true, but why wait? Why wait that duration? So it's not about forgetting. It's about doing the self-work and remembering and saying, well, I was through that. I did it. So that you can bungee jump again, so that you can scuba again. There can be accidents underwater. There can be difficulties underwater. But to be able to look at it and to say, yeah, that happened. Come, let's go again. You know what I mean? Karen, thank you.
We have some questions in the chat, so I'm going to read them out. I'm going to start with the one that's
These
most
questions
applicable to what you
mean
just said.
voiceless questions. Ah, shall I text back to them?
No. I'll ask you for now. Prem Sai says, is there a preventive process or do we need to work when these things emerge?
Hmm.
Hi,
Well,
Anil.
you can. Hi. Hi. Hey, Prem Sai. That's
Yeah,
your question?
Yes.
yeah, that's my
Okay.
question.
Okay. Well, I will say you can carry all the raincoats and all the umbrellas, but you can still get wet. And when you get wet, don't blame the raincoat, don't blame the rain. Just a rainy day. That's how life is. Come back, dry yourself, get rid of whatever you went through, and get ready for another rainy day. Life is out to get you. It happens in wonderful ways and miserable ways. But it happens. It doesn't have an agenda to punish you, but you can be punished. Yeah, it's not your fault that it rained on your crops or hailed on your parade. It's not your fault. It's an American saying. It's not your fault. But it's your responsibility to heal from it.
Thank you. Thank you, Anil.
Thank you, Prem Sai. Nice to see you.
Yeah.
Divya has bad network, so she's asking me to read this out.
Okay.
What's your advice to young students like me? And how much energy is too much energy? She says she's super enthusiastic everywhere all the time. It's just who she is, and she worries when people shuts her down.
Student or adult, there's no distinction in the way we work. At the end of the day, we're just human beings. Yeah. The difference between student and adult would be what? Vocabulary and some extra money that we'll have. Simple, right? You subtract vocabularies and some money. We are youngsters, that's a distinction factor. Well, my suggestion is a butterfly might get hurt when she's navigating through some regions. Vulnerability is a gift. Make your vulnerability your identity. If you think you get hurt, then that's who you are. You can't put an iron case around the butterfly and expect the butterfly to fly because the world is harsh. Just that who the butterfly is. Yeah, it's just the true nature of life. If a tree has fruits, it's gonna get stoned. I mean, people are gonna throw stones at it. So you got to be aware of it. You got to take your own precautions. But people shutting you down is not a comment on your voice. It's a comment on how they couldn't see themselves have that voice for themselves. So they realized the only way they can be superior to you is by shutting you down. It's their response to their traumatic events. And you come to this position of compassion to recognize that what they're doing to me is what they cannot tolerate for themselves. It's their traumatic response. Yeah, and it's not a comment on myself. It's not a comment on my energy. It's not a comment on my voice. That's who I am. I just need to change my context. I just need to change my context. As long as I'm going to stay in that context, I'm going to get those comments. And if I change my context, the comments I receive would be a lot different. Yeah, these are just my viewpoints, and I think you'll know better. Yeah, Shreya.
I just have a response to that because even today, there are people who tell me I'm too much or I'm too extra. But one rule that I follow is if you don't take care of my child, or if you don't pay my bills, or if you're not invested in my growth, or if you're not my boss, then your opinion is your opinion. It's not my cross to bear. It's not my weight to carry. I just wanted to share that with Divya because when you're like that, you think you're the one that's wrong in the context of this universe that exists, right? Because I grew up like that. My teachers told me I was too overconfident. I just realized that I was confident and the over was their perception of my confidence. But it took me so many years to come into that. It's taken me the journey that I've had to say, it's okay, doesn't bother me. But I do realize that when you're at the receiving end of that, when you're younger, it tends to form so many layers on constantly questioning yourself, saying, am I too much? Am I too extra? you know, and we've had this conversation where sometimes you do question, you're like, maybe if it's a collective response, if
Yeah.
that's how everybody feels, then maybe I am the one that needs work.
I think it was Alice in Wonderland, where Alice goes down the rabbit hole and meets Hatter, Johnny Depp, in this movie. And Alice is saying that, what, I have to kill the dragon and slay the dragon and all that. She looks at Hatter, Johnny Depp, and says, I can't do this. Hatter looks at Alice again and goes around her 2 times and says, you are so much muchier. I think you have lost your muchness. So if someone tells you you're too much, tell them you're too little. Change the context. Change the context. Thank you. Thank you, Divya. Karen.
Actually, Durga has a question. I'll hand it over.
Yeah. Good evening, Anil.
Hey, good evening.
So somewhere deep down, do you think people think it's safe to hold on to this imposter that we have inside us? And what do we stand to lose if we get rid of this imposter?
Very good question. And I'd like to respond to that, saying that, well, if I'm the prime minister of a country, or if I'm the president of a corporation, or maybe if I'm running this spiritual center, and I may like to have my drinks, but I don't want to show it out on my Instagram. So I want to show that I'm not this, because that's good for business. So as long as my mask is consciously kept for a tangible outcome, and I know that's not me, it's great. But if I keep it, and at some point in time I forget that I'm not that, and I become that, and then when I start giving inappropriate versions. Have you heard this, people saying that there are teacher giri tere paas hi rakh? Like, if you're a teacher, keep that in your school, because people recognize the to you. So when you bring inappropriately the wrong person, people are going to stop you, unless you are that person, like the Dalai Lama, or someone like that, or Thich Nhat Hanh. That's a better example. Thich Nhat Hanh. Like, you knew that he's the same person in Plum, in Thailand. When you meet him outside, you just meet him anyhow. He's the same person. So unless you become the mask, you're going to have the mask. So don't carry the mask. And it's okay to fake it till you make it. But if the journey is going to take you a long while, then you are the fraud. Okay. And the risk of loss is when their identity crashes, maybe business collapses, share markets go down. Same thing what you see nowadays in the news channel, right? Big corporations going down because the image of the person goes down. Yeah. Yeah.
More questions, folks? I see a lot of people here, and this imposter syndrome thing keeps coming up when we're talking about women in leadership. And yes, Nikita, why don't you just ask the question? Just unmute yourself and go ahead and ask the question. Okay, so Karen, you can pose
Yeah,
it.
I'll read it for you. Great
Thank you.
session. My question is, when people around you stop telling a woman you have imposter syndrome, as everyone thinks we multitask better, but still at every point approval is needed.
I didn't get the question.
Let me.
I think the question for me comes through as a seeking of validation. How
Okay.
people around us tell us that we have imposter syndrome because everyone thinks we multitask better, but still at every point, somehow women are seeking. So I think the question is, when women are constantly told you anyway multitask better, why is there still a seeking of validation to conform or confirm that, yes, I'm good at this, or I can do this? my assumption is
So
that's what it
this
sounds.
can be a very individual question. And at no point in time can we generalize anything because we are so unique and all our experiences are so unique to us. And, we are just a collection of subjective experiences. Well, is those validations or those approvals coming from, sorry, seeking something for self? Then that's a different approval. Is it a approval based on a hierarchical model where approval is the protocol? Then that's the protocol. So I don't know what's the quality of this or the texture of this approval that she's written. So it again depends on, very subjective, very subjective. But one of the ways I feel you can deal with it is to begin to talk about it. We need these safer spaces and communities where somebody can talk, not because after they talk, they will, somebody will comment on it or share something or anything for that matter. We need spaces where people can come and talk, just talk. And at the end of it, the other person can just say, thank you for sharing, adding nothing to it after that. Because when the client shares, they're able to see that again. And in the process of seeing it again, they have found or navigated their way through it. Yeah. The whole idea is to begin to believe in yourself again. And how do you do it? You do it not in the same context where you're affected. You do it in another context where you begin to rediscover yourself. Maybe a new painting, maybe a poetry, maybe a scuba, maybe a solo trip. But you go and find out who you are. You rediscover yourself. You reinvent yourself by saying that, I think these are my strengths. You take up a new course. You join a guitar class. You begin to now see yourself through the eyes of unknown people in a whole new context, through newer compliments. And now you have a different feedback mechanisms. And now those voices were not true, maybe. And then, these are feedbacks. What do you do with this feedback? Yeah. Does that make sense? I had a friend growing up, and I have known her as so vulnerable and soft spoken. That's how she was. And there was one day I went to her building. She was my college friend. I went to her building. And in the building, she was like this control gunda, like a don. And I looked at her and I said, what's going on? And after all these years, I begin to understand that she has two identities. Like in her society or in her building where she's in her apartment where she's living, maybe that's her way to survive her people around, or that's how she gets her positions there, or that's how she gets to do her things. But in college, when we were together, she never had to do it, probably because she could find her safe space, or I don't know. So little places where you find your masks. I'm not saying remove it. I'm saying be aware of it. Know what utility is it serving. Know that do you still have the volition to remove it, or is it some kind of coercion? Ask these questions. Or also find out, is there an inclination, a proclivity to go towards that side all the time? Or is it volition? Do you have a choice? Anything without choice is dangerous. Exit policy is the rule of life. If you don't have an exit policy, be it investment or love, you're trapped. Make sure you have an exit policy. Abha. Did I get the name right?
Yeah. Hi, Anil. Thanks a lot for this session. Actually, my question was around the similar lines of what you spoke right now, how we should reach out to communities. And I was just hoping to get to know from you, like, how do we make the best use of these communities, and like, how do we reach out to mentors and seek on how we can overcome or mitigate this imposter syndrome? Because over here, I think it's a great platform of getting awareness of the whole term in itself and understanding some slight differences between our personalities and the feelings that we're facing. But once we feel that we are in that space of, yes, I might be facing imposter syndrome in my professional life, how can we best reach out to the community as well to probably seek advice? And as well, how do we also create a supportive environment in these communities? How best can we also help our peers?
Do you want to take that, Shreya? Or yeah, just one sentence I want to add before that. The first step to that is to break this definition of imposter syndrome. To the lesser you use it, the better it is for you to get into an action plan by saying that it's self-doubt. The understanding of imposter syndrome is the success that I've got, the life I enjoy, the relation I have, I begin to feel I don't deserve it. It's a voice inside, it's a self-doubt. So don't, like a cabbage, put more layers to it. It's going to be difficult for you to peel them. Okay, Shreya.
So, one of the things that, we have, I have other folks from other communities that I've been a part of here as well. When you look at sharing, like Anil said, these small bite-sized things, the imposter syndrome which we've built on ourselves is layers and layers and years of feeling that we aren't good enough. And especially for women, from a layered context of that understanding, whether it's workplaces that they occupy. For instance, negotiation skills are a lot more difficult for women to maneuver and navigate because they feel like conditionally the ecosystem has not supported that pay parity, right? They say it's going to take another 212 years, which we don't have the patience to wait long enough for pay parity to come into play. And that is, but when you juxtapose the conditional with the volition or choice that Anil speaks about, you will see women who are paid at par. You will see non-binary people, breaking that glass ceiling and really occupying positions of power. They are not outliers. They are people who chose to take control. They're people who chose to not let the narratives of how they were defined allow them to feel like they don't deserve this. And for me, what has usually helped is journaling, especially when it comes to sort of when you visualize, you always have filters that you put on. You put on a filter of saying, okay, this is how many years of experience I have. So this is how much salary I should get. Okay, this is how, I was perceived at college, hence this is how I'll be perceived at work. So it sort of clunks on as layers. And when you sit down with yourself at the primary core, we all have the exact same thing we all have to work with, and that is ourselves. And also, when you're dealing with an imposter syndrome, which is interesting, right? When you build compassion and empathy, which is strong, not compassion and empathy that is weak, where you're constantly feeling overwhelmed for everybody, but strong empathy and strong compassion, which comes from objectivity and yet being able to be kind. Interestingly, your imposter syndrome dips because with empathy comes confidence. And this is, I'm just saying this as I'm thinking of it in my head, and it just landed to me. It's so important to recognize the fact that there are other people on that same journey as probably you are. And that in itself gives you collective feeling of community. Saying, oh, if there are 15,000, 20,000 people in my own, circle of existence that are feeling the same way, then it's a lot easier for me to deal with it than to think I'm alone. And oh, I'm the only, and it's so sad. And why is this happening to me? It's happening because you now have the choice to make sure that what it does to you is up to you and not to it. So.
Yeah. Karen.
I wanted to do a quick time check because we're at closing time. So if Shreya, you or anyone has one last question, or we can do wrapping up and last thoughts.
Last question going once. Last question going twice.
Santosh.
Yes. Go ahead.
Hi, Anil.
Hey.
Could you shed some light on the term concept of self?
Concept of self. Oh, that's very simple. I'll put that in 2 sentences. Sentence 1. What do I think about myself? And when I speak of what do I think about myself, I'd like to break it down into what do I think about my behaviors, about my capabilities, about my beliefs, about my, the basic things that defines me. That's one. What do I think about me? When I think about myself in private, what do I think? When I think about myself, what do I think? So it's concept of self, it's self-worth. This is not uniform because now comes the important part. What do I think in the presence of another? This brings self-esteem. Key, when my principal is standing, what do I feel about myself? When my director is standing, what do I feel about myself? This is a market value of self-worth. You know? So it's like, well, I have an 8-bedroom hall kitchen, but when I go to sell it, I realize that, oh, he's only giving me this much. So self-worth is what I feel about my house. Great. But the day you go to sell, your self-worth is thrashed because your self-worth becomes a market value because it's self-esteem now. So concept of self, your self-worth has to be, I'm sorry, I'm using this, it's got to be fucking bulletproof. If your self-worth is bulletproof, you can survive the brutalities that happen to you. Most of the times we suffer because our self-worth is contaminated. Yeah.
Sure.
I
So the
hope you-
concept of self may lead to kind of a superiority complex or inferiority complex.
No, concept of self will not lead to. The concept of the mask will lead to.
Okay.
The mask is what you carry, which can be a hierarchical definitions. That
Okay.
can be superiority, inferior. That's a mask. But the concept of self is just to know the true value. What are my capabilities? Not what I show. What are my feelings? What are my emotions? What are my beliefs? What are my values? Just after that comes the next question. Now, what do I want to do with these? Want to keep it as it is, or do I want to work on it and grow this? Yeah. There's an action plan after that. Thank you, Santosh.
Thank you.
Karen is pressed on time.
Yeah, we usually stick to what we promised. So we started at 6:35, so we can wrap up by then as well. I'm assuming no more questions. Shreya, any last thoughts? Else, Anil, if you have any last thoughts, then we can wrap up accordingly.
I think we covered it all very nicely. Good audience. Some with cameras on, I can see these faces. Some with names on. Some with photos on.
Malini, yes?
Yes, Malini.
Yeah, I just want to share that there are a lot of times when I feel that imposter syndrome, and I used to understand the meaning, and that's what my purpose of joining this session was. That what do we actually understand by it? So when I am in that situation, there are two questions that I reflect upon. Uh, how am I feeling? First thing, and second, why am I not making an exit? What am I getting out of it? And that is what the game changer is for me.
Thank you for sharing, Malini. I think it's when we think of women, non-binary people, when we think of technology, I think we often tend to put ourselves in a little bit of a pigeonhole. What we don't realize is for us to really exist as our full selves out there in the universe and in the world that we occupy, it's important for us to equip ourselves with tools that the ecosystem provides. And these are mental health tools, soft skill tools, things that help you grow in your career. And one of the things that we're consciously doing and bringing Anil in today is one such reason is to equip people with the choice of these tools and to say, here are a bunch of things that you can, use on your journeys of your careers as you grow, as you learn, to be able to really show up for yourself in a way that, you deserve. So that's my last few words. And thank you so much, Anil. Every session you has something new to learn. I feel that, and I know I share and echo the thoughts of the audience as I do that. Yeah, everybody's commenting on great session, wonderful session. So thank you, Anil, as always, for
Thank you for the
showing up.
opportunity. Thank you for the space to share without being judged or without being questioned. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Anita.
Karen, back to you
That
on the dot.
Nothing else to add. I'm just glad we had this session. It was a topic that kept coming up in our community discussions. And so I think this conversation was enlightening, yes, but also empowering for a lot of us. We, of course, have a lot of work to do on ourselves. I mean, this is step one to understanding it, but also what do we do next, I think. So I think on that note, we shall call it a day and give everyone their Monday evenings back to them. Yes.
Gratitude to all of you for showing up. Thank you.
Thank you so much. See you soon.